Hello, folks. For those of you that have joined for the Albemarle County First Lunch and Learn on our comp plan, thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just a moment as we start to see those participant numbers climb. And thanks for everybody for joining. For those that have, we're going to just give another minute or so to let everybody join us during our lunch hour to go over the comprehensive plan chapter of the development areas and land use. So bear with us for just one more minute or two. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Lunch and Learn for Phase 3 of the Comprehensive Plan Update. Today, we're going to focus on the Development Areas Land Use Chapter, and I'm so excited to welcome, about 50 people so far. We had just under 100 people register, so I'm really excited about that, and I'm going to turn it over now to Tanya to walk us through this presentation, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and some next steps after that. So Tanya, over to you.
Thanks, Serena. We'll go through just a quick agenda so you all know what we're going to cover today. First, we'll talk a little bit about where we've been and how the actual document will be organized. But today we're going to be focusing on the development area land use chapter, which we've been at PC and board on already and have been wanting to reach out to the public to see what kind of questions there are and just see how it goes. So we'll talk about land use, we'll talk about our growth management policy, we'll talk about the goal, objective, and actions for this chapter, and then finally we'll wrap up with where we're headed and our next steps, and then hopefully have plenty of time for Q&A. Let's start with where we've been. We kicked this off with phase 1, where we developed our guiding principles, which are there on the right in the colorful wheel. We also performed the land use build out analysis to help us find out our targets. We also reviewed our growth management policy during phase 1. And in phase 2, we updated the goals and objectives that we had previously in our 2015 comp plan. We also developed some land use and transportation planning tools. There were several ways for folks to engage with the project in those first 2 phases. Either through our website, our AC44 website, there were videos, there were podcasts. We had almost 35,000 visits to our website. We had several e-newsletters, which we will continue in this phase, and really had some good responses to our public meetings and questionnaires. So diving into how this document will be organized, it will be organized into 4 parts. The first part is the community vision. So it's really setting the context, establishing our vision, and then developing those guiding principles. This sets a stage for the rest of the comp plan and where we want to go as a community. In part 2, this is our growth management framework and really looking at what the policy is, what it does, how that policy is applied for our development areas and our rural area. And then it establishes a development area utilization review and establishes how we will evaluate success. We have part 3, which is the implementation chapter. These are the chapters that we'll be going through during these lunch and learns. And the structure for these chapters are, of course, an introduction, really setting the stage of the broader goals and objectives that we're trying to achieve around this particular topic. There is a goal statement of what we want our community to be like in 2044. So this is a 20-year plan. And we have established objectives so we know when we get there, as well as actions to establish how we'll get there. And then in part 4, this is our appendix where we will be establishing what those metrics are to measure the success of our actions and how we'll update our area plans going forward. Also, all related and reference plans and studies will be referenced here or attached. And then there will be a process and engagement summary in the appendix as well. So let's start with our growth management policy because this really underpins the whole document. This was established in 1971. It's been updated along the way. And what this policy does is it designates the development areas and the rural area. So you can see on the map on the right, Charlottesville is in yellow, but Albemarle County is in blue and green. So those development areas are in blue. And then the rest of the county that's in green is really the rural area. So the policy directs growth and density to those development areas or the blue areas so that we can get a mix of uses and a variety of housing types, and really tries to limit the development in the rural area and focus on agriculture, forestry, and conservation. And just as a reminder, we wanted to start off just reminding y'all what land use is. This is how a property is used, whether it's housing, shops, parks, farms, conservation, and those general categories that those uses fall into are generally residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use, etc. So in the comp plan, we focus on future land use so we can establish how we want our community to be in the future. Land use is not zoning. They are related but similar. So zoning is what can be built today. these are the land uses that are allowed on a parcel under current regulations. So right now, this is under Section 18. It regulates the land uses for each property and the site design and building form. So every property in the county has a zoning district applied. Those will not change with the comp plan. So we've applied the land use categories to our future land use map. These are included in our comprehensive plan and our area plans. So the future land use category recommends the future land use, the density range, which is units per acre, building form and scale, and is used to guide the review of rezonings and special use permits. And every property in the county also has a future land use designation. So remember, future land use designation is that vision of how we would like our community to develop and grow over the next 20 years. These were originally established in our area plans. We have 5 of them. These categories were brought right straight over to our future land use map that you just saw a glimpse of. There was a little bit of translation. Let's go to the next slide there. Sorry, I thought the map was next, but anyway, there was a little bit of translation. We did consolidate a few of those categories, and we'll get into that in a moment. So these are the land use tools that we use to implement the growth management policy. And those include, of course, the future land use categories and the map, but also this idea of activity centers that I'll explain in a moment. So these future land use tools, we're proposing 13 future land use categories. This is consolidated from the 20 categories that came from the 5 area plans. And these were consolidated because many of these categories were very similar and had significant overlap. We're trying to standardize our future land use categories going forward and into future area planning efforts. So these were applied in a one-to-one matching approach, meaning that the same vision that we had in the area plan still applies in our new comp plan. This will be adopted with the updated comp plan, and so the board will adopt both at the same time, a future land use map and the comp plan. And they'll be revising the 5 area plans as well. So the idea here was to standardize the application of these land use categories and provide some needed clarity. Here's a few examples of what those land use categories look like. I'll just pick the community mixed use right there in the middle. This tells you the land uses allowed or envisioned, and then the density in units per acre. Remember that could happen over several stories, and then secondary uses that might be envisioned here as well. And we did recognize that there were 3, in fact, categories that didn't translate necessarily to another category. So we are calling these land use categories that include downtown Crozet, neighborhood density residential low, and village center. And those primarily, those 3 appear between the Crozet master plan and the Village of Urbana master plan. So these categories would remain in the area plans as is, but would not be applied to future area plan updates. So here's what that future land use map looks like. You can see how the general uses are fall into a couple of categories: residential, mixed use, commercial and employment, and then institutional, public, and recreation are applied on the map. I should also mention this is in our draft chapter that is available on our AC44 Engage Our Albemarle website, and you'll see a link at the end of the presentations if you would like to see this in more detail or go over any of these ideas in additional detail. So here's where we start to explore this idea of activity centers. And this is an area where we would suggest that we really focus on allowing a variety of businesses, services, and housing options. So this could be a place where you live, work, and meet all of your daily needs. These help us prioritize our infrastructure projects and investments, coordinate our land use and transportation planning, and these also were presented in a few of our area plans or master plans. And really, as part of this effort, we consolidated 50 of those centers down to 30, so we can really start to prioritize and focus our investment in infrastructure projects. These activity centers are establish a hierarchy of place types, and so you see that hierarchy here, with the smallest occurring on the left, or the local activity center, all the way up to the regional center on the right. So as you can imagine, we have a few more local centers than we do of the regional centers. So what varies between these tiers of activity centers are heights allowed, typical features that you might expect in the built environment. And so we also supplied a few examples of which activity center might exemplify each one of these. So for example, in Pantops, the Riverside Village down there at Lower Pantops would be a good example of a local activity center, whereas Stonefield might be a better example of a regional center. So we'll look at the community center, which is the middle type, and just dive into some of the specifics. This is really intended to serve as a focal point for commercial and cultural activities that are accessible by a number of transportation options for surrounding neighborhoods and areas. So you can see here that we're looking at between 2 and 6 stories with active ground story use with windows, really trying to enliven a space and encourage that pedestrian activity. So it ends up becoming a destination where you can pick up a transit stop, but grab a coffee beforehand. And there's a potential here for structured or back of building parking. So let's go quickly through the goal, objective, and actions for this chapter. We'll start with the goal really establishes our vision specific to this topic. And then our objectives are what we need to do to get there. And our actions are really how we do it. So starting with the goal statement, this is really the vision. You know, we want these development areas to be thriving, walkable, mixed use with a variety of housing types, connected by transportation options to goods and services. Neighborhoods will be green and resilient with tree coverage and protected natural features. Land use planning will consider the housing and business needs of current and future community members. I should say that on the map in the plan, these are represented as ovals, and these boundaries will be more determined more specifically as part of a future area plan. So objectives, looking at objective 1, our goal is to, or our target is to increase the use of infill higher density development, adaptive reuse, and redevelopment in the development areas. We have a total of 4 objectives for this chapter. So second objective is to increase the number of jobs and housing units in the activity centers. The third objective is to really invest in the existing neighborhoods in the development areas. So we see that increased connectivity and some equitable access to not only the activity center itself, but also parks and open space that might happen, and also the infrastructure improvements that go along with those centers. Objective 4 really addresses increasing the tree coverage in the development areas. We'll be expanding this objective to include environmental stewardship in general, broadening this objective a little bit, so that we can address tree coverage, stormwater runoff, water quality as well. Looking at objective 1, just a few examples. I think there are 9 actions under this objective. So we just picked a few that really exemplify how this objective might be achieved. We're planning to update the zoning ordinance. We'll develop public realm standards and establish urban street standards, as well as update our lighting requirements that are outdated. Objective 2, the way we will increase the number of jobs and housing units is we can reduce some vehicular parking requirements. Makes it a little more cost effective to build these units and is more accessible to all of our community. Remove some minimum lot sizes and street frontage requirements, and then identify and fund projects that support this type of development. Objective 3 is really about investing in our existing neighborhoods, and actions that support that is making sure that we coordinate our land use and transportation planning, making sure that we're investing where we need to. So we'll collaborate with the community on new facility locations, and then we'll also look at allowing small scale commercial uses along off-road connections. Looking at the tree coverage objective, the last objective in this chapter, those actions include updating our street tree requirements, potentially creating new tree preservation and protection requirements, and then collaborating with our partners and property owners to preserve existing clusters and stands of trees where we can. So that's the end of the chapter. Explanation. So where we're going, we're currently in phase 3. So we'll be developing introduction narrative for each chapter, along with the goal, objectives, and actions for each chapter. We've reviewed the goal and objectives in phase 2. So really what's new in phase 3 is the actions. And you can see over on the right-hand side of the slide, those are the 10 chapters, topic chapters that we will be covering over these lunch and learns as well. So here are a couple of upcoming events. I did mention that we've been to PC and council regarding development area and land use. We're now working through the rural area land use work sessions. The next one coming up is December 10th at the PC. And then after the first of the year in January on the 8th, we'll be going to the Board of Supervisors for the environmental stewardship work sessions. We've got a PC meeting on December 17th, if you'd like to hear more about that. Or you could also tune in to the Board of Supervisors meeting on January 22nd. We'll be continuing these lunch and learns monthly, where we will be we will be explaining a synopsis, I guess you could call it, of the chapter, of each chapter that is the topic. And then we'll be doing quarterly check-ins in person. I believe the first one will be late January, early February. So we'll cover all the chapters that PC and board have covered, and look forward to seeing you there. So there are a couple of ways to participate, and I think I'll let Serena go over these if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So here you can see a graphic that outlines all the different ways that we're going to share the plan chapters as they roll out at the bottom there. And this is on the website as well. You can see the order in which we're going to roll out the chapters. And so some of them will be bundled. So we'll do a lunch and learn for 2 chapters sometimes. The next rollout will be the rural area land use chapter. So we'll do one dedicated lunch and learn to that and have a lot of different opportunities. And we're going to share the word by putting newsletters out, putting content on the website, posting to social media, and then having our website calendar for albemarle.org. I really appreciate a lot of you who have shared this information about the lunch and learn amongst your networks. We really rely on that as well. And then in the middle there, you can see some of the ways you can participate. First would be reading the materials and getting acquainted with them. We have on the website, we have what we're calling an Ask a Planner tool, and that's a question and answer widget that we can respond to questions and post those answers publicly so everyone can see these great questions. As you're doing now, we attending a monthly lunch and learn, attending work sessions. Both the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission, as you know, will have a lot of work sessions associated with these chapters. And then we have a really cool new tool up on the website that allows everyone to look at their proposed plan actions, comment on those actions, upvote those actions, and actually suggest an action of your own. So if we have time, we might get into that in this presentation. And then you can see some of the materials that you'll be we'll be sharing with you. So the draft chapter, which is on the website, summaries, and we're going to be doing podcasts. So stay tuned for all of the new and interesting ways we can communicate about this project. I'm going to jump into these questions we have here. Right now, I see I'm going to read some of the questions we have in the Q&A and then ask Tanya to delegate or answer those. So our first question is, how are resources such as water, power, and roads taken into account with growth?
So this is a really good question. I will say that we work with our partners, the service authorities, especially on water and sewer, and where it currently happens, where it's currently provided, and so also on capacity as well. So we take that into account when looking at our ability to grow farther, and into our build out analysis tool. And as far as transportation goes, again, we do the same thing where we work with our VDOT partners and our transportation planning folks to make sure that the roads that we have can handle the development that we are proposing.
Great, thanks. I have another question that came in, and then we have a hand raise. So also, if you don't want to use the Q&A tool, feel free to raise your hand and we will invite you to unmute and share your question. The next question is, what plans for greenways and parks are there for the areas designated for development?
Another good question that we are working with our Parks and Recreation Department to address, and it should be addressed in the Parks and Recreation Department, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space chapter that we will be discussing in a few months. So we can get into more specifics then.
So stay tuned for that. Okay, I have Dennis Odenov, who's raised their hand, and I'm going to, let's see if I can do this. Ask to unmute. All right. we're
Can you
ready to
hear
hear
me?
your question. Yep, we can hear you.
I actually have a few short questions. You list Ravenna Village as a small community commercial center. It's one of the centers that's community center. And I have to point out that for the last 10 to 12 years, in spite of all the efforts made to get commercial interests interested in the commercial area of Ravenna Village, there has been one response. It's been completely a zero because that commercial center would be off 250, cannot be seen. And commercial interest from my conversations with them say that really there's not enough business that they could be drawing in. So I was wondering if you have considered that in light of that information, which I'm sure has been relayed to you.
It has, and we did take that under consideration. These areas that we identified were either identified in a small area plan. We really looked at the areas that were either already working towards an activity center or may in the future. And so we felt like we should include this one just as potential. We are reviewing these again with the PCM board, and we've heard your exact comment as well, and are considering removing that designation from the village of Rivanna.
Okay. Secondly, could you tell me a little bit more about this legacy designation for Village of Ravenna and Crozet? Because I understood you to say we'd use those designations now, but not in the future.
That's
For future
correct.
development?
That's correct. So right now we would leave those three legacy, what we're calling legacy land uses would remain as part of the master plan, the adopted master plan for those areas. They just would not be used as, we would not designate them anywhere else on a future area plan update.
So that means that for any future proposed development in the village of Ravenna, it would still apply to land use map you have on page 22, which is low residential, for example. There's a whole low residential area. Is that correct?
At this time, that land use category would apply.
You say at this time, that makes me nervous. What does that mean?
It just means that that's our current proposals to carry
Okay.
that forward.
Okay. And third, I guess I have to comment on the fact that I'm a little disturbed that there isn't more attention given at this time to coordinating with VDOT on transportation plans. Because as you know, in the village of Ravenna, we've had 250 going out from Charlottesville to Village of Ravenna is being a road that's over capacity. It's been over capacity since a VDOT study in 2005. And still, additional developments have been allowed to the point where right now there's gridlock certain times and commuting hours. And so I really think that they should be brought in sooner before this thing gets further down the road. And I just want to comment on that.
I appreciate that.
Can you talk a little bit about how the county staff is working with partners in developing the plan?
Sure. So we have several partners that we work with throughout the planning process. One of them is VDOT, and certainly our transportation planners are in constant contact with VDOT. And we really try to make sure that VDOT, along with our other partners like the Service Authority, the Health District, help me out, Tori and Ben, with other partners. We have external partners also, like our bus provider. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name at the moment. we are coordinating with them to make sure that, again, what we're proposing does work with their future plans as well. So I just had lunch with one of the VDOT employees that will be looking at our transportation plan. So that is coming, and we'll be looking at it in more detail with the transportation chapter.
Okay, we have another question that's come in. If the Board of Supervisors is only approving 58% of the comprehensive plan density, when will the development area need to be expanded?
So at this time, the board has made it clear that the development areas, they are not considering expanding the development area. This would be something that would have to be discussed after we review a number and evaluate a number of factors. And the board directs staff to look at that. This is really up to the board to determine when to consider expanding the development areas.
Thank you. Okay, so for actions, are there any specifics identified yet on the zoning ordinance updates that are needed? And what kind of input are you seeking, staff, public, etc., regarding any changes or updates to the zoning ordinance?
So the zoning ordinance, there is a project currently underway called the Zoning Modernization Project. Sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful for me. And staff is currently working on the different provisions in that zoning ordinance. One specifically that I think we're considering is potentially allowing accessory dwelling units in one of the, in some residential areas in select places. We haven't determined if it would it would likely be under a special use permit. So that is something that we've determined we want to look into more. So there are a number of things that we're considering with the zoning ordinance, and those should show up in all of our actions. And it is a separate effort. We still coordinate between the two efforts, but the staff that you see here is really focused on the comprehensive plan, and it's a different set of folks working on the zoning ordinance update. So I can't really speak to the feedback that we're looking for on that project.
And there's a question that I can take. It's, are there also offline ways that invitations to participate are being distributed? And I can answer that. We have, we've been on the news, we've been on the radio, we make invitations at the different meetings that we attend, and we also have a plan to distribute paper flyers to local stores so that hopefully people can learn about these opportunities that way. Also, certainly invite any and all ideas to get the word out even more. All right, let's see. The next question is, well, we have a hand raised. Robin Hoffman, I'm gonna invite you to unmute.
Hi, I just want to first of all say, of course, Serena is amazing. So I've been going to these meetings for many years and just user friendly. Thank you so much. You're so considerate. Secondly, I have gotten solar on my house. My 4 neighbors also have gotten solar on their homes. They're about 1,000 square feet of coverage. I'm not paying any money per month at all for my utilities. I mean, for my energy. What I'm suggesting is that people are, coming together with these planning meetings thinking it's still cost prohibitive. Well, we are engineering the installers at PVCC currently. It just opened up the Bolick Center, etc. Anyway, it's going to be an industry here if we start building stuff. And I just don't hear people saying how much profit the utility company is making, because it took 2.5 hours for them to install my solar on my about 1,000 square foot roof. So what I'm saying is, it didn't cost me anything because I'm old and poor. But, and that was because of the climate initiatives handed down from the federal government. But now with this new thing, I think all administration people need to hear this all the time. How you're going to build things with just renewables. And that way they can see the profit in, for instance, rentals. They can take more profit from the rentals. They can take more profit from the commercial entities and stuff like that. I just want to know, why isn't that like the first thing everybody's talking about, so that we can propagate, more people to work and things like that, that's a job, and so forth and so on, if you get my drift. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. So yeah, Tanya, what role does the comprehensive plan play in solar and vice versa?
Sure. So as some of you may know, there is what we've been calling a solar ordinance effort underway. And that particular topic will be addressed in we believe we're putting it in the community resiliency chapter. It may also show up in our environmental stewardship chapter. So this is really guiding more about the overall role of solar energy in the resiliency of our community.
Okay, thank you. The next question from the Q&A is, the recent population increase in the county has been 1,200 to 1,600. It is my understanding that the population last year increased. What role does the comprehensive plan play in how we consider what the question asker said, absorbing that many people?
I'm going to take a little bit of a break because my voice is starting to give, and ask if either Ben or Tori could field that question.
Tanya, can you, or Serena, can you repeat the question? I was responding in the chat to one of the other previous comments.
Absolutely. So, yeah, talk about how the understanding that our community is growing is responded to and planned for in the comprehensive plan.
Sure, a few ways. One is that we are still sticking with the core growth management policy, where we would like to direct the majority of growth to the development areas, and that includes housing. And that land use build out analysis that we referred to, that's going to be done again. It's going to be repeated every couple of years, so that we are actively monitoring capacity and how much development potential we still have within the development area. And certainly residential growth will continue in the rural area, but it is currently continuing at a much slower pace than the development areas, and we anticipate that to be the same. That helps protect our rural resources, water protection, and it also slows the division of rural properties.
Thank you, Ben. All right, so the next question we have is, thank you for the efforts to make activity centers accessible, like for example, having sidewalks. How are you planning access from current developments to these centers? For example, in Pantops, the Riverside Village is directly across from a neighborhood and a bus stop, but there's no easy way to cross the road. How do you plan to address pedestrian safety specifically in this plan? And what data do you have on pedestrian safety in areas like this?
Sorry about that. So this particular topic of pedestrian safety is we really focus on in our transportation chapter, and provide objectives and specific actions on pedestrian safety. We were just talking about this earlier this morning. So that chapter is under draft and should be released for review in the next month and a half. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, we want to make all modes of transportation and moving around the county as safe as possible. So we have specific actions for those to make that happen.
Great, thanks. Another question that came in, has there been any discussion of changing the binary state, so development and rural, of the comprehensive plan? Have we looked at other options that might not be just two kind of concepts?
We haven't really. We've been maintaining the growth management policy as established, and that has been at the direction of our board. So we've been maintaining that approach.
All right, let's see. Another question. Why was net density that is now in the existing comp plan eliminated?
So net density wasn't necessarily eliminated. We're now using gross density for the calculation of the area that's developable within a parcel. So it's just we're using a different way to calculate that, so that it is based on the land that is actually available when you take out the regulated components of the parcel.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna share this question. Let's see. How does quality of life in the development area and quality of life in the rural area play into the considerations that you make for the comprehensive plan? And how do you balance the priorities associated with both?
Wait, that's a really big question. And I will, again, reach out to Tori and or Ben to help me answer this question because it's at the forefront of our mind. We're really looking to support our residents both in the development areas and the rural area. We're trying to ensure that we can all still meet our daily needs and get to our destinations that we need to and access the services that we need to on a daily, weekly basis. So that is really a big component. A main goal of a comp plan in the first place is to make sure that we're servicing our residents. Looks like Tori has popped up, so I'm going to see if she might have more to add.
Sure. Thank you, Tanya, and Tori Kenelopoulos on the long range planning team. I think just to add on to that, I think a lot of the other chapters will support those recommendations as well. Kind of as Tanya alluded to earlier, we'll have a Parks and Rec focus chapter, environmental stewardship, housing. And within those chapters, there's recommendations that relate specifically to the development areas, specifically to the rural area, and some that are countywide. And so they all work together to make sure that we're improving quality of life in both the development areas and the rural area. So not just related to land use, but also parks, protecting the environment, and all of those other topics that we'll be working through.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So Tanya, and others who can chime in, can you talk about how climate justice, specifically using the guiding principles of climate change and equity, are a priority and a focus of the work, and how that might show up in the comprehensive plan?
Absolutely. So we determined this was actually coming from the board, that this was these were two important areas to focus on. Staff developed an a climate and equity lens that we view all of our objectives and goals through for each chapter. So we do make sure that each one of those objectives are equitably that how do I say that are equitably applied and are really focusing on making sure that most of our community has access to parks, has access to services, and including a variety of options. So different modes, different ways of safely getting from point A to point B. So as far and climate action as well, we've been working with our climate team as well to make sure that where we can insert actions that further our climate goals as established in our plan, that those have been included in not only in the actions but also the objective and goals. Our community resiliency chapter will have a climate action focus, and will really start to address specific goals.
Thanks. So some of you may be familiar with the form-based code that is associated with the RIO 29 Small Area Plan. This question is about asking if there is any consideration of expanding form-based code beyond this RIO 29 Small Area Plan in this comprehensive plan process.
So as part of this process, we have not considered that, but I will say that internally we've talked about the idea of it and recognize the value in the form-based code and that it may be applied in other places. And I think where it makes the most sense for that to be considered is in our regional centers, which I believe there's 4 of, 3 if you don't count RIO. It already is, but yes, it has been considered. We have talked about it, but we won't be able to do that with this plan because we really want that to be a part of our future area plan effort.
Great. Well, that wraps up all the questions we had that came in through the question tool. If anyone else has a last question, you can raise your hand or, oh, here we go. How can preservation of tree coverage be reconciled with clearing large parcels of wooded area for additional high density housing?
We just talked about that with the board last night, and it is a balancing act. So we have this goal of including more high density development in the development areas. And unfortunately, that might mean that we lose some trees. I think that we will recognize as a county that we will need to, when we do clear those trees, that we really have to make it count. So we encourage the density in that location so we can preserve trees in other locations. Having said that, those trees will be required to be replaced where they couldn't be preserved. So it is a balancing act, and we recognize that, and it will be a challenge, and I think the board is up for it.
All right, I'm going to say this again, but I haven't seen any more questions come in. Certainly, we can wait to see if another one comes in. But in the meantime, I am going to just pop up our, let's see, share my screen. Our, hopefully you're seeing the engage page. If you visit our online project hub, we'd appreciate it, and sharing the word that this project is happening. I love the diversity of questions that we've heard today, and so many different topics. And I think it's amazing that you have spent the time with us today to learn a little bit more about this chapter. Like we said, we have many more to go. Oh, somebody else? We have many more lunch and learns to go. So please, next time, bring a friend, tell a neighbor, and we look forward to hosting you again next month, talking about the rural area land use chapter. And if we don't have any more questions, I'll leave this up, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for everybody that participated today.